ask anybody's question but yours. You're an idiot. And really a disloyal person.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of Disloyal Idiots, a Fans First Sports Network podcast. With you as always, Steve Haller and Christian de Guzman. No Andy Pregler because, well, he's on a milk carton somewhere again. Joining us for this special edition are Andrew Ledman and Ryan Bonaparte from Boiler Alert, the Fans First Sportsnet Purdue podcast for all things Syracuse versus Purdue this weekend. How are we doing, guys?
I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
Yep. I'm thankful that Syracuse plays under a roof and doesn't have to deal with too many elements.
Yeah. You know, 5.5 hour delay in your week 2 game really is not something you planned for, but it worked out for Purdue with that win over Virginia Tech.
Yeah, that's we actually had something similar up here on the other side of football last night. Syracuse hosted Siena for a men's soccer match that got called in the 53rd minute because literally they were, every time they took a step, they were splashing.
Oh my. Yeah,
I was watching the video feed of it and I was like, this is not humanly right. Like, you should not be running these conditions. So yeah.
Fun soccer polo.
What's that?
Do it like polo.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There you go. It basically could have been last night. So yeah. So we've got that for anyone who is randomly seeing either of these feeds and living under a rock. Syracuse will be traveling to West Lafayette, Indiana to play Purdue at 8:00.
7:30.
Okay. I'll be in Disneyland, so it won't matter to me, but everybody else will be watching at 7:30. So yeah, ACC to Big Ten and rematch of last year. I don't know where anybody wants to start it off, but feel free.
Let's talk about last year first, because
do we have to?
Well, I won't get into why Purdue lost because you guys can better articulate that. All
Penalties. I can tell you why.
Yes, that was a big reason. But Andrew and I were talking a little bit before this. That game was weird.
We specialize in weird games here at Syracuse.
Yeah.
And as much as I think a lot of people on the internet that loved that game last year at Sicko's committee, I don't necessarily want that again this year for both of our sanities.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, absolutely not. So, Steve, you said you're going to be in Disney for this game. Last year, during the Purdue-Syracuse game, I was at Sesame Place with my son. So I'd recorded the game, but I was also getting alerts on my phone. So I see Syracuse is in the lead, Purdue's in the lead, Syracuse is in the lead. And then I see Purdue takes the lead with 41 seconds left. And I'm like, all right, it's over. It's over. And then I kind of put my phone away and we're hanging with Elmo or Grover or something. I don't even remember. And then I get a bunch of messages all at once, like text messages, group me, WhatsApp, Twitter, ESPN alert. And I'm like, what is going on? And I look at my phone and I'm like, what happened? So of course I had to dig into what went on. And then the 2 penalties after the Purdue touchdown and kicking off and you guys get the ball at the 50. And I was just okay. And then when I watched it, it was even worse.
Oh yeah. And this is the game that both teams were completely allergic to the end zone in the first 3 quarters.
Yeah.
And then decided to wake up for a ridiculous 4th quarter that turned into that stupidity at the end. I think all of us as Syracuse fans can also say we did not deserve to win that game. Purdue probably didn't deserve to win that game. I think that if the dome roof had collapsed, that probably would have been the fitting end to that debacle.
What that game needed was a 5.5 hour rain delay that ultimately decided that the game would end in a no contest.
Yeah. So it would have been better for everybody.
But alas, the internet won because, I mean, how many times have you seen Sicko's committee use that gif of the girl that says, "This is so effing stupid," and pans down to the guy just going, "Woo!"
Yep.
The internet is undefeated. You know, you can't beat the internet. So I don't blame you there.
Very true.
And the best part about this is that this is a primetime game this year on mainstream cable NBC.
NBC, baby. Home of Notre Dame.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems to be the only time we get NBC games. But for some reason, people saw that matchup last year and were like, you know what? We need to show the world this.
Yeah. More people should see this game, and it should represent the best of both the Big Ten and the ACC.
Right. Yeah,
And of
is there
course-
some
yeah.
secret like SEC folks on the board at NBC saying, you know what, let's grab these and make us look even better?
Could be.
Or they just wanted to give Noah Eagle an interesting game.
Yeah,
There you go.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So I have a question for you guys.
Fire away.
So I asked, because Ryan and I also write for the SB Nation site for Purdue, and we traded questions with the Syracuse representative, and that was you?
That was me.
Wait
And
a minute.
It was me
You were
last
so
year.
confident
Yes.
about this game. I don't understand.
Yeah, no, I am this is a stretch for people who are used to my content on our site on News Position, because I'm usually the pessimist on our site.
So what's going on? 18-point victory.
Yeah, we'll get to why I said what my final score is, because yes, I did go for a bit of a stretch. The big thing is the defense. I'm absolutely in love with this defense, and a lot of people are coming to terms with one of the trendiest defenses in the college football landscape, and that's the 3-3-5. If you watched any of the college football playoff last year, that's the defense that TCU ran, and you'll see it actually in the Big Ten later this year when you guys played Nebraska, because Syracuse's DC last year, Tony White, is now Nebraska's DC, and Nebraska's defense isn't Nebraska's problem; it's their offense.
I was going to
And
say,
a lot of-
Nebraska has a lot of problems.
Among other things.
Yes, Nebraska does have a lot of problems. Well, you guys can dive into that when you guys eventually play them. So, of course, when Syracuse lost Tony White to Nebraska, a lot of people are asking, okay, who's going to be the next guy that Dino Babers brings in to take over and become the DC? Well, it turns out he brings in Rocky Long, the guy who actually invented the system in the first place. And what we've seen from the first two games, yes, it's against much lesser competition against FCS Colgate and
That was going to be my rebuttal to you.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's against much lesser competition against FCS Colgate and bottom of the barrel MAC Western Michigan. However, this is a defense that, even given those opponents, it's a defense that looks faster and more aggressive and more in tune, more fundamental than the Syracuse 3-3-5 under Tony White. It's because you have the guy who literally invented a defense teaching the defenders who already have a pretty good grasp on what they need to do. And back when the 3-3-5 was initially introduced to Syracuse, you have defenders all the time saying how much they love this system, how much freedom they had in terms of just flying to the ball and playing with basically their ears tucked to their back and just going after ball carriers. And it's a reason why you've seen so many Syracuse defenders drafted. Starting safety for the Jaguars, Andre Sisco, famously honed his craft in this system. You got Garrett Williams and Ifeatu Melifonwu, both quarterbacks who got drafted in the third round, and honed their craft in this system. And so it's a defense that has grown more in more ways than I thought than its previous predecessor and from Tony White. And I think that's why I think this defense is something to be reckoned with.
And you can mark this clip and you can pull it out if Purdue gets absolutely dominated. But you can play it in your next episode, and that's fine. I'll take the L. But I'll just say, I think any defense will look good against that level of competition if they're competent. I mean, your defense should look competent against, Colgate. It's like when Purdue last year played Indiana State, and it was like 55-0. We had just absolutely dominated them. But you can't really take anything from that. It's like putting Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie Kindergarten Cop. Is he a giant or is he facing kindergartners? No one really knows. We'll have to find out later when he faces the real villain. So I would just say it's a little too early for me to say anybody's defense is really that good yet.
now, for the record, Christian is part of the thing is we're Syracuse and we're not used to actually looking competent against those teams.
And Christian, I apologize. I did not recognize your name. I just scanned right through that email. So sorry.
Good. Yeah. I will say, and one of the things I did mention that the Hammer and Rails readers will be able to see in the Q&A is that there is one weakness to his defense, and we're not sure how it's going to fare out. It's going to be their run defense, and that's one of the ways that Purdue could maybe squibble their way against their defense, against the Syracuse defense. It's if Devin Mockabee has a good game, because last year, the reason why Syracuse lost a ton of games last year towards the end after going 6-0 to start the season was run defense. And you saw guys from Notre Dame who were under 100-yard rushers having near 200 yards against Syracuse. And
it wasn't good.
The run defense just in general last year towards the end of this season was not good. And we're still not sure, again, because the level of competition hasn't been great, we're still not sure if those problems have been fixed. Yes, the Orange did a great job stopping the run last year against Purdue. Who knows if that's going to hold up again?
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question because, like you said, last season, Purdue could not get anything going on the ground in this game. But this was really before the Devin Mockabee show got fully in tune. So we've kind of figured out we have a budding star on our team, and I think we would like to start to realize that we can utilize him and scheme around Devin Mockabee a little bit more. So obviously that may present a new challenge for the Syracuse defense this season.
Steve, it sounds like Purdue and Syracuse have a similar problem.
Yes, 100%. Well, no, is their problem their offensive line is a pile of hot garbage sometimes, or
sometimes? Yeah. In week 1, we played a 5th string center.
Oh, we know how to do that. That was 2 years ago.
That would, I mean, and I said in the questions, Christian, you sent me, I was like, you don't really ever have a 5th string center. You know, it's not on the depth chart. It's just, it's like, it's a lineman who knows how to snap the ball, or maybe
it's not even that. As a former college center, it's like
your 5th string center is your 3rd string long snapper.
Yeah. Hey, it's like a guy who
long snapper too.
It's a guy who went over on the sideline and they're like, hey, you're the center now. Come talk to Hudson Card and snap a couple times, and then you're in.
And hope they don't follow it. Yeah, we were down 2 years ago. I think we were down to our 3rd string, and we were in kind of a pistol formation, and it did not work well for anybody involved in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I was amazed it worked for Purdue as well as it did. Like, there were no really bad errant snaps. There was no like horrible miscommunication between the center and the quarterback, but the 5th string guy wasn't out there too terribly long before the 4th string guy came back. But still, it's not great.
Yeah. So Syracuse is dealing with some injuries up front. Christian, I can assume you were just waiting for the point where offensive line talk happened.
Yep.
It's inevitable on our podcast that I go into some weird diatribe about the offensive line every week, but for your guys' sake, we do have some injuries up front that are hopefully recovering. So what we've seen for the first 2 weeks hasn't been what should be our number 1 offensive line. We did lose our starting right tackle last game, but then we'll likely be getting our starting guard and other starting guard back. So it's going to be weird up front. I don't know what Purdue really what they bring on the defensive front that could cause some troubles and could put you guys in a good spot.
Ryan, why don't you tell them about our? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so I think really the strength of Purdue's defense is the front 7. Really, the outside linebackers in Nick Scorton and Kydron Jenkins are our fast, athletic guys who can get to the quarterback when they're rushing, and then our interior offensive linemen, they're pretty good at plugging holes. So last week against Virginia Tech, only allowed 11 rushing yards in total. So they did a pretty good job blocking up some holes, especially since it was a downpour, and you kind of tend to go to the rushing attack in those games. So definitely our strong suit. Now we'll just kind of glaze over the secondary and go from there.
I like to hear that. I don't like that the front seven would be your strength in the sense that LaQuint Allen is still kind of trying to get his feet under him this year. We saw in the bowl game last year, we saw him feature and look extremely good. This year, we can't really at this point tell if it's a function of Babers keeping the playbook really tight like he is wont to do until a game like you guys, or whether it's just our blocking scheme is in a situation where it's not going to give him space. We're hoping the former. You guys are probably hoping the latter.
Right.
So we'll see how that one pans out. I wouldn't be surprised if you start to see him more in a chip and go swing pass type role, kind of a late league delay type situation, which could be viable if your secondary is as happy and fun as you think it is.
Yeah, it's had some problems. It's not good when receivers are getting behind your secondary multiple times in a game.
Donovan Brown is licking his lips right now.
Yes. Brown and Alfred are very happy at this point of the pod.
Yeah. And you'll be up. I mean, also be happy to hear, and Andrew, if you took a look at my answers, that Syracuse is actually most likely going to be without its top target receiving wise.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, Ryan was going to ask you about that. How sure is this that he's out? I mean, I don't know because every school does injury reports and all of that different. So I'm not sure how Syracuse handles those. So
Syracuse is one of those universities that doesn't have like a medical university attached to it, like, with Pitt and UMPC or something like that. And so Syracuse hasn't been able to consult with doctors in terms of Oronde Gadsden's availability by the time that Dino Babers held his press conference. So he wasn't able to give an update on whether Gadsden would be available for this game or not. And for those Purdue fans who are listening, what was his injury? His injury was some sort of right ankle injury.
Okay.
His right ankle got rolled up on during one of the first possessions of last week's game.
Second play of the game, yeah.
Yes, like this, it was probably the second or third play from scrimmage for Syracuse. He was helped off.
Rogers.
Yes, he did.
Okay.
Hopefully it's not as bad.
The Jets fan here is not happy.
Oh man.
So
I'm sorry to do that.
You remember you're talking to a Bills fan here, Christian.
Yes, I do.
We're even less happy.
I do realize that. Thank you for the 20 fantasy points for my Jets defense. And so he left the field. Gadsden left the field, was helped off the field, went to the locker room, and came back on crutches and with a boot on his ankle. So obviously he didn't play the rest of the game. This wasn't a Rogers situation where it clearly looks like he had like a ruptured Achilles or anything. And Babers, in his initial thoughts after the game, was hopeful that, or was at least hoping that he could get Gadsden back out for this game. From what we could tell, I don't think he'll play. Just because Babers does like to be careful with injuries. Yeah. And if he even talks about an injury, it's usually, and doesn't immediately say a guy is going to be available for the next week, it usually means that guy is not going to be available for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So I do not think that Gadsden will be available for this game. And for the Purdue fans, you might remember Oronde because he had 2 touchdowns last year, including the game winner.
Yeah, he had quite a game.
That was
All-American this year. Son of former NFL wideout Oronde Gadsden.
May or may not have, battled with Pat Surtain at high school and really honed his craft there. So he was going to be and continues to be one of the favorite targets for Garrett Schrader. Unfortunately, he might not be available. Now, Syracuse does have options to mitigate that. Namely, Isaiah Jones is going to be the number 1 target to be the guy who replaces Gadsden. And he's kind of got a similar body type, a little less tall and a little less heavy, but has the same type of speed explosiveness and explosiveness as well. Showed some really good hops as well in the first couple of games at Syracuse. So if 50-50 battles in the air are not your secondary specialty, then, and I see that it's not, Jones might have a really good, might have a fun day.
Gotcha.
And so yeah,
one of the questions I had for you, kind of looking at the Syracuse stat line so far, is I know you mentioned LaQuint Allen as their feature back, but they really have 3 running backs who are in that 17 to 25 carries range so far. Is that just a product of who they have played?
Primarily. You're
Indeed.
going to see a little of Juwan Price, but beyond that, you're not going to see much of anything besides Allen, I would assume, once we get to the feature games in the schedule. Allen was delayed getting into camp, so it also probably is a bit of them, continuing to get him up to full throttle. I got a hunch when you looked at this schedule, those first 2 weeks for Syracuse were effectively 2 more weeks of higher tempo game speed camp. So this is like the start of the season for a lot of what we're going to be seeing consistently, I think.
To give you guys context, Syracuse's starters only played 1 snap in the second half against Colgate and did not play at all in the second half against Western Michigan.
Yeah. That, like I said, with Purdue playing Indiana State last year, that sounds a lot like what happened in that game as well. It was just like everybody got to play in that game. I mean, you go through the roster and you look at it, and they're like, appeared in 1 game last year, and they're like, I know exactly which game you appeared in because it's the same one that everyone else did.
It's the give the walk-ons sometime on the field game.
Right.
Which never used to be a thing. Now that you don't have to burn a red shirt.
Right, you get 4 games. Yeah.
So let's get to the part of the pod that I think Syracuse fans want to hear, and that's about your new QB, because it's a big name QB. Because Hudson Card, if you're the Texas starting QB at some point, you're going to get recognition. But now he's at Purdue, and while he's probably not the same level as AOC, there's probably some decent strengths and weaknesses that Syracuse fans have to look out for. What are those?
Yeah, I would say for the first and foremost, if you're comparing him to Aiden O'Connell, Hudson Card is much more mobile. It's staggering, but that's more so speaking to how immobile Aiden O'Connell was. Hudson Card can definitely use his legs. We actually, in the first 2 games, would have liked to see him use his legs a little bit more often, just because at times he would have 4 or 5 yards in front of him, but would, sit back and try to make a play with his arm. Now, obviously, that's good if you have a big play coming, but getting those yardage is helpful. Usually. So if you have Hudson Card as the quarterback, I mean, I don't know that he has the same weapons he had at Texas. That said, he still can throw a pretty accurate ball. He's looked pretty posed in the pocket, and he can escape a pocket, like I said, with his legs. We just would like him to run a little bit more, and if he can get the ball out a little bit quicker to his receivers, it would be helpful, just because sometimes a route breaks down a little bit more. But overall, we like what we see, and we're obviously excited for that talent that Ryan Walters brought in his first year through the transfer portal. So there's still more to be desired, and we think he can give it to Purdue fans.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add is if you are trying to compare Hudson Card to Aiden O'Connell, or AOC as we call him, just because it is so much easier to type everywhere than Aiden O'Connell. Aiden O'Connell had 2 very, very good weapons in the receiving corps at his disposal. He had Charlie Jones and he had Payne Durham. Granted, Payne Durham is tight end, but he was a very active receiver in that Purdue offense last year. Whereas,
we know.
Yeah.
Whereas
4 yards later, we know.
Yeah, right. Whereas, Hudson Card has been without his number one tight end, and he's really struggled to find, I think, a go-to receiver at this point. Deion Burks is very, very fast. He certainly played like a number one receiver against Fresno State, but then was held to just one reception against Virginia Tech. And so he's had to spread the ball around quite a bit. So I think that has both helped and hurt this Purdue offense because they're not over reliant on one guy like they were on Charlie Jones last year. But at the same time, if it's it's 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, you got to have somebody who you can trust. You got to have somebody who you can get the ball to in a tight spot, who can fight for 1 or 2 extra yards if you get it to him behind the sticks. And I don't know that Purdue and Hudson Card really have that guy right now that they have that rapport with that they can really trust on a 3rd and a really difficult yardage.
Nice. Well, we're about halfway through here on our time, and I know we were talking pre-show about some of our favorite things in terms of Syracuse special teams, and I know that Ryan,
I thought you were going to try and throw a home field read in there.
Well, we could do that as well because it is halftime. We'll do that real quick and say, first of all, Disloyal Idiots is sponsored by Home Field Apparel, your one-stop shop for all your throwback Syracuse and even Purdue throwback apparel jersey. You can use the code Noons23 at checkout for 10% off your first order.
Don't disown us for upping the Purdue side of things. I know he's an Indiana fan, so
yeah, we know.
Though they did drop some really solid stuff for you guys.
They did. They have some really good Purdue stuff.
Like those are really sharp.
Yeah, I've got a couple upstairs.
Nice.
All your comfiest throwback apparel, whether it's Syracuse, Purdue, or even your new conference mates in UCLA, USC, Oregon, Washington. Yes, this world is still weird. You can use the code Noons23 at checkout for 10% off your first order. But we love special teams here at News Edition and as Syracuse Online people because of our love for Punter U. And I believe, Ryan, you've got some fun punter things for us here.
Yes, I do. Okay. So I kind of explained this pre-show, and our listeners have heard this every single podcast, so they know what's going on. But for your viewers, what we like to do is we took a Sickos community post online where they had the amount of punts it took each school and their punter to get to that school's nearest Culver's.
Each Big Ten school.
Correct. Yeah, because Culver's thrives in the Midwest.
Yes. Butterburgers, frozen custard, all of the things.
I don't know what any of those things you said were.
It's a very delicious fast food chain that serves, instead of ice cream, they have frozen custard, and it's very, very good, very, very thick. And of course, they've got the burgers that have like a nice butter on the buns, and it's just very good.
Yeah, I'm in.
Wisconsin's finest.
Yeah, and then one of their sides is delicious cheese curds. So what's not to love?
Okay,
there we go. Mm-hmm.
We also respect that in upstate New York here.
Yes.
So the idea is that we've gone through is we want to take a certain spot in the world where it has something to do with the school we are going against. And this week it's Syracuse. So I have taken the average punting distance of your punter, Jack Stonehouse, which is 46.6 yards.
Okay.
And I will give you the amount of punts it would take Jack Stonehouse to get from Syracuse's stadium to somewhere in the world. And with that distance, you'll be able to guess where he's punting to, given his leg doesn't fall off from the amount of punts. It's usually many punts. Mm-hmm. So, it would take Jack Stonehouse 87,714 punts to get to this location. Now, obviously, that's not exactly fair. So it's over 2,000 miles.
That was about where the math just got me. So
Yeah.
Wow,
Same,
that's
same.
some fast math in your head there.
Yeah.
it's like, all right, times 3 divided by 5. What are we doing?
Yeah.
And remember, it's a location that is significant to Syracuse in one way or another.
Right.
I'm going to guess the New Orleans Superdome.
Nope, not quite.
I feel like that's not 2,000 miles, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's a bit further than the Superdome.
Okay.
But it could be if you go eastbound and go overseas. We're not shy of going overseas on this game.
Huh. Would it be the hometown of Maximilian Mang, our tight end?
Nope, not quite. And if you guys have guesses, you can just keep shouting out. Eventually, I usually just need to give it to you.
Is it?
It's usually
Is it the
a
center of
random
the camp?
enough.
Is it the center of campus of SMU, one of Syracuse's new ACC mates?
No, but that is an excellent guess.
That is a very good guess.
Significant to Syracuse.
Yeah, that's the part that I'm like trying to think of as well.
I'm like,
I'll give you.
my brain is
think
like
of Syracuse's mascot.
So is it somewhere in Miami?
No, but you are on the correct line.
I think I might have an idea because I don't even know, but I'm not going to say it.
2,000 miles.
For those who are only listening, I believe Christian is Googling something to find a distance here.
I didn't look up distance because I'm not going to cheat like that. I did Google where the Mascot Hall of Fame is because Otto was just inducted this year into the Mascot Hall of Fame, but I don't think that is far enough because it's only in Indiana.
Yep.
So, okay. So you guys ready? You want me to give it to you?
Wait, let me guess.
Let Andrew go for it.
Is it in Florida? Is it the Tropicana factory that's just outside of Tampa?
No.
Ah,
Oh, that was a good guess.
That was honestly, so I had two responses to this, and they're the same thing essentially. So this is actually the distance to Orange County, California.
Yes, that's
Which weirdly
So-
ties in even more because our former editor at Noons lives in Orange County, California.
Yeah, he does.
All right. So, but the other answer would have been Orange County, Florida.
okay.
Yeah. Both of those would track. Yeah.
I like it.
And
like it.
Is Cal in Orange County?
I don't know, but they're about to get back in this.
Yeah, they are. God.
I believe Orange County is Southern California.
Yeah.
So maybe it's some of our new Florida
Yeah,
conference
definitely.
mates.
I did ask Andrew about this in our Q&A, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts because we can't have a college football or just college athletics podcast in general where we have two schools who are talking with each other before bringing up realignment in some weird shape or form, because this is the weird world we live in where Syracuse now has their men's soccer team playing Stanford at one point, and your wrestling teams are now going to be taking on Oregon and Washington.
Yep.
So this is a weird world. Well, how do you feel about your new West Coast friends?
Go ahead, Andrew.
Oh, okay. I told him in my email, but I'll say this. It's very weird. I mean, the Big Ten is a Midwestern conference is how we've always known it. It was kind of weird when we added, Maryland and Rutgers. It was kind of weird when we added Nebraska. So it's been weird for a little while, but now going literally coast to coast, it's just going to be bizarre. But it's one of those things. It was going to happen whether the Big Ten tried to add somebody or not. So the Big Ten really had two choices: either stand pat with the 14 they have and say, look, this is who we are and we're going to stay here. And ultimately they might have been one of the next conferences to be rated if other schools or if other conferences had taken, these Pac-12 teams. So now the Big Ten is stronger, which means Purdue is stronger, and they're going to be getting more money, which, love it or hate it, college sports is increasingly run by money, by TV contracts. And so Purdue just made themselves incredibly more secure with, depending on which account you read, an additional 30 to 50 million more per year than a lot of other schools get. So while you can say tradition is ruined and, we won't be playing our traditional rivals as often anymore because we've got to go to the West Coast now, ultimately Purdue is going to have more money. Purdue is going to be able to upgrade more things, be able to hopefully run a smoother athletic department. And ultimately, while you may not like the changes, they were going to happen either way. It's one of those like get on or get out of the way. And the Big Ten, decided not only they were going to get on, they were going to drive the bus. So you gotta take that and run with it, I guess.
So if I was recording this podcast back in 2012, you could have just cut and pasted your audio for Syracuse going from the Big East to the ACC. And it was literally the exact same situation of, well, it's going to happen and they're going to give us more money and okay, let's go.
Yes. Right. And then the Big East died and then the Big East was reborn. Long live the Big East.
Right. That sounds about right.
And you sound like half the people in our comments section who want Syracuse to go back to the Big East.
I'm sure. I cannot imagine, like, if Purdue had, for whatever reason, changed conferences, it would have just been a nightmare. I mean, people get upset in our comments when Purdue Pete gets slightly tweaked in, a kid version that they put on T-shirts, and it's like, this is awful. Burn the whole department down. So, No, it's not just you. Cool. As I said earlier, the internet undefeated. Change anything and you're going to hear it.
Fair enough. Now, my question is the ACC going to be renamed
to the All Coast Conference?
Yes, exactly. You took the words right out of my mouth. Still ACC.
Again, also, internet undefeated. I've seen that way too many times.
Oh, yeah.
You got to stay consistent with the branding, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's still the Big Ten, even though there's going to be 18 teams.
Yeah, until it turns into the Big 20, it's going to be the Big 10.
Do you guys just put an asterisk next to the 0? And
well, of course, I mean, the famous and best usage of it was when the Big Ten added Penn State, and then they became 11, and then there was the hidden 11 in the Big Ten conference logo. And that was the best. And then, of course, we ruined it by adding other teams. But
so what happens is the
Big 10 times 2.
Well, what happens is the Big Ten logo is just the IG is just going to be larger.
Yeah, well, there's also people who have turned the G into an 8.
Oh, yep.
God.
So we're the B18.
Okay.
That sounds like the next. It sounds like the next fighter. Yeah, it's going to say it sounds like the next fighter jet that the U.S. military is prototyping.
It's a droid or an X-wing version. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now that was the name of the warhead that Luke used to blow up the Death Star.
There you go.
Right,
sir. That was a proton torpedo.
True. Yes,
it was.
Sorry, I was so rash about that.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to leave this podcast.
Well, you can jump on the podcast I host in.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
What's that?
I have a nerd news podcast, like a weekly nerd recap podcast that I run. We're doing
there you go.
An Ahsoka season or episode recap in 15.
I haven't watched the one that came out last night yet, so
go do it as soon as this is done.
That's my plan. That's my plan.
The internet unites a lot of things, like nerds.
Yes,
absolutely.
Mm-hmm. But going back to the now All Coast Conference, or ACC now, that is not just the Atlantic Coast Conference, it is also in a weird position because our co-host, Andy, and I, we're kind of united on this idea that we don't necessarily think the ACC had to add Cal, Stanford, and SMU. But what came out later in terms of the reporting that was done actually made the move make a lot more sense, because when the ACC and ESPN made the ACC network, the conference created what was called a grant of rights, and it's a very tight contract that tied the teams to the ACC and kept them there until something like 2034, 2037.
2034.
2034. And if a team wanted to leave the conference and move somewhere else, they would have to pay an exorbitant amount of money to break those grant of rights. What was reported is that Clemson, FSU, and UNC were prepared to start making moves to pay that money and leave. And so what also was announced was that if the ACC ever dropped below 15 members, then it opened up the grant of rights to be renegotiated. And right now, that contract can't be renegotiated until 2030. And so by adding Cal, Stanford, and SMU, it ensures that if Clemson, FSU, and UNC do want to jump ship, the ACC will still be at 15 teams. But if that wasn't the case, I don't think the ACC really needed to, because it's not like the ACC doesn't have the same cash inflow that the Big Ten has and the Big 12 and the SEC. And so it would just make it currently is making just logistics a nightmare for the ACC.
Yeah. That's what I'm not looking forward to for Big Ten teams. It's going to be strange, especially we'll have to be playing, Saturday night football games over in over in California, or, in Oregon, Washington. So we'll be playing at, what time? East Coast time, where most of the Purdue fans live. It's going to be weird.
Right. We're used to Pac-12 after dark. I didn't realize we would need Big Ten and ACC after dark too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's realignment talk, everyone.
There you go. Yeah.
Congratulations to all of us.
Cliff notes. None of it makes any sense, but we all had to do it.
Yep.
So we're slowly starting to wrap up here on our Disloyal Idiots Boiler Alert duo podcast. We've definitely talked about the strengths and weaknesses of each team. Andrew, I asked you about some of the unsung heroes. I want to hear some from Ryan as well. But Andrew, why don't you start first and tell me who your unsung heroes on both sides of the ball that Syracuse fans should be looking out for as like kind of those sneaky guys that you wouldn't think of?
So I think for me, I listed an offensive lineman as an unsung hero for Purdue, and
Steve will be very happy.
And a lineman who hasn't even played this year because he's been out with injury. So I put Gus Hartwig. He's the starting center for Purdue, but he's been out the last 2 weeks. And I think without him, you've really seen a difference in the offensive line. And that shows kind of what an unsung hero he has been for this Purdue team. He's been so stable throughout his career at Purdue. He has done a really great job at the center position, which is obviously a very important position on the offensive line and on the offense as a whole. And being without him has just showed his value. So he is the guy who I listed on the offensive side. And then defense, I put someone who Ryan mentioned already, and that's Kydron Jenkins, because he's a linebacker on Purdue, outside linebacker, and he doesn't get the same amount of publicity, I think, as a guy like Nick Scorton does, but I think he's really come into his own this season. I think he has made a big improvement from last year. And I think as the season goes on, he's going to be someone you're going to hear more and more about.
Yeah, absolutely. So on my end, offensively, an unsung hero, I'm kind of going to go with one of the second or third options at wide receiver, and that is Rahman Yassin. So he is very consistent. He's not always the top threat that people game plan for, but he can still give you 4 catches, get downfield, make the right moves. The problem he's had over his career is injuries, so that's sort of held him back a little bit. But when he's on the field and when he's healthy, he's very consistent and makes a contribution to the offense that helps you win. On the defensive side of the ball, I'm going to go with a freshman, and I'm going to say he's unsung just because of how young he is so far. It is Dylan Thieneman. Both his brothers play for Purdue. He is the third Thieneman to play, and he has led the entire Purdue defense in tackling. He leads the Purdue defense in interceptions with 2. And he's just made some big hits and some serious plays for a guy who's 18, 19 years old. He looks to have a very bright future, as his brothers did at Purdue.
Yeah, he was the other guy I was going to mention on defense, but I wasn't sure how unsung he was since he's getting so much publicity, just being like a true freshman, playing and getting 2 interceptions so far through 2 games. But I think he's the other answer that makes a lot of sense to me.
We know in Syracuse that if a legacy player does pretty well, the fan base is probably going to latch onto them.
Yeah.
See one.
Yeah,
Buddy.
love to see that last name that you recognize,
Yeah, so you see one Buddy Jackson Thomas Boeheim on the good old basketball side.
Well, I think there's about 6 Boeheims on that team at one point, right?
It felt
blood,
like
blood or none, yeah.
Yeah, blood or none, yeah. So I know, Steve, you've got to get into another podcast here shortly. Do you guys have any more questions for us? Because I think Ryan and I were hoping to end just with some predictions, and I don't want to keep you here longer than need to, so you miss your other podcast.
No, let's jump right into it.
All right.
Sure.
Do we want to go 1 and 1? So one of you guys and then one of us, and we'll go back and forth.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
You want to lead off since you've already been alluded to as the surprise.
I will lead off. As Andrew said, I am predicting an 18-point win for Syracuse. It is 34-16. Yes, this is out of character for me, but like I said, I think it's the defense that carries this. And yes, I know that the defense has only played FCS Colgate and bottom of the barrel MAC, Western Michigan. But just through the eye test alone, this defense looks better than when the past iterations of this Syracuse defense has played against similar competition. And most of the contributors that we're seeing in this defense are veteran guys who are back and are really hungry. The main focal point is going to be Marlo Wax, who is sliding over from the weak side linebacker to middle linebacker. And he is still playing with basically his head cut off and rushing the A-gap like no tomorrow. The free safety, Elijah Clark, is going to get his head involved in every play no matter what. And the quarterbacks, who may have been a concern after both of our starting quarterbacks last year left due to graduation and the transfer portal, both of the starting cornerbacks this year have stepped up and played tight coverage in Isaiah Johnson and Jeremiah Wilson. If the run defense can hold, and if Devin Mockabee regresses to the form that he showed against Syracuse, I don't think points are going to be easy to come by for Purdue. And that gives me a lot of confidence to say that the Syracuse defense will lead the Orange to a victory.
And that's a forced regression of Devin Mockabee, not like him just magically not playing well.
Gotcha. Ryan, do you want to go for us?
Yeah, I will go. So the one X factor I think in this game is actually just surely the location. We hadn't really talked about it. I know your kicker has not missed a single kick this year, but when you're playing in a dome, it's a little bit easier. But I think Purdue at night presents just a whole new environment. Kind of the blackout and West Lafayette at nighttime. They've been some big games there. I've got Purdue in this one 31-24, just because I liked the effort we saw from the defense last week as opposed to in week 1. I think they're on the right path. The offense is getting healthier, and if Devin Mockabee can make that extra effort against a defensive line that has some issues, I think that bodes well for Purdue. So 31-24 Purdue.
Okay. I might almost flip that on its head and go like 27-21 or something. I'll end up putting it on paper tomorrow when we publish the article, but something in the vein of like a one possession Syracuse win. I don't think this is going to be the stupid game. I think this is going to be a much more
crossed
palatable game to watch. I think both teams have pluses and minuses that each other can exploit. I do think Syracuse will end up coming out on top just between how Schrader has changed his game as far as actually looking downfield to receivers instead of just tucking and running immediately, as well as, like Christian said, the defense. You guys understand the how we watch a game versus how most people would look at a game, and they're passing the look test more so than they have in years past. So probably a one possession game, Syracuse victory is where I'll settle.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was really surprised when we hopped on here that you guys said that Christian was the pessimistic one.
Yeah, normally
so,
he's completely the pessimist.
To give you an idea, in our preseason predictions for overall record, everyone kind of went with 8-4, 7-5 records for Syracuse. I went with a 6-6 and almost put down 5-7.
Okay, all right. So they've convinced you you're converted.
Because like Steve said, because like Steve said, the Syracuse team is passing the eye test a lot better than it has in previous seasons.
Gotcha. So I am last. I'm going to go 35-31 Purdue. As everyone here has said, I think both teams have flaws, and I think it's ultimately going to come down to which team can exploit that flaw. I know Christian and Steve, you've both said that you're a little concerned about the Syracuse offensive line, as well as not knowing fully who is actually going to be on that offensive line. You're hoping to have some guys back. And I think the Purdue defensive line can really take advantage of that. I think they've done a good job so far this year. And I hope that will mask some of the problems of the Purdue secondary, preventing the quarterback from having a lot of time, preventing those plays from developing, maybe make them a little bit more one-dimensional. So that would be great news for Purdue. And also, I do think the hopeful return of Gus Hartwig will make a difference, allow Devin Mockabee to really have a much better game than he did last year against Syracuse. And overall, I think, to Ryan's point, playing the game at Ross-Ade at night, you just see a trail of top 10 teams that have gone into Ross-Ade at night and lost over the last few years. And I think it is a sneaky, difficult place to play at night. So if this game was at Syracuse, I would feel differently. But since it is at home in Ross-Ade, I'm going to go Purdue pulls out a 35-31 victory.
Well, it promises to be a good game. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Now that we've all predicted a good game, it's going to be a complete shit show.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It's going to be like a 4 turnover, 2 safeties, missed field goals. It's going to be everything.
Oh, so a Syracuse.
And as weirdly has been the theme of this joint podcast, if that happens, the internet wins.
Yeah.
There you go.
Right.
What a perfect ending.
Sickos, man. We're here for the sickos.
Perfect ending.
We are here for the sickos. At Sickos Committee, we love you and endear you as always. Well, that will do it for this joint episode between the Disloyal Idiots and Boiler Alert here on the Fans First Sports Network. Andrew and Ryan, thank you so much for taking some time to join us today.
Hey, thanks, guys. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. So everyone, if you're watching on Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, wherever, thank you all so much for watching. Leave a like, leave a follow, subscribe, leave a comment on your podcast provider of choice so that we can trick the algorithm into expanding the Ottoman Empire. And while you're there, leave some 5 stars and a comment as well. For Steve and the missing Andy Pregler, I'm Christian Guzman. You guys won't like it, but we always end our podcast here on the Disloyal Idiots with a good old Go Orange.
Go Orange.